We really do, but we're gonna go ahead and get started.
Okay, so
I appreciate all of you being so flexible and making a shift in your schedule for us tonight. There are multiple events going on tonight, and so we wanted to move ours forward so we can have most of the candidates here with us. I'm going to speed through my beginning portion so we can hear from our candidates, which is who you're here to talk to, not me. All right, so first I want to thank our sponsors, the Wortham Center, of course, for having us in this beautiful space, the Orange Peel, Asheville Art Museum, Asheville Symphony, Blue Spiral One, Hatchworks Co-working, and Brunk Auctions. I also want to thank our Arts Coalition. The Arts Council founded the Arts Coalition in 2021 as a way to expand our reach and make sure that we were covering the entire creative community. And so they've been very involved with planning these events and helping us craft our questions, particularly our chairs, you see here. The Arts Council was founded in 1952. We are the designated arts agency for Buncombe County. Though every Arts Council is different, they all are focused on accessibility, advocacy, and philanthropy for the arts. Our mission is to keep the arts at the heart of our community, and we do this by supporting arts professionals and arts businesses in Buncombe County through connection, advocacy, and services for creatives. So this is part of a creative sector series. This is our third candidate forum. Next up, we have a State of the Arts brunch in November at the Orange Peel, November 2nd. Tickets are on sale. I hope you'll be able to join us. And then in February, we're going to have a meet and greet event at the Asheville Art Museum with our newly elected officials. And once we know who those officials are, we'll set the date for that event. So these are our city candidates. We have the city council candidates up top, and then we have the mayoral candidates below. Unfortunately, Antoinette Mosley and Shanika Smith were not able to join us tonight. All right, I'm going to go over the ground rules. Our moderators will ask the questions and call on candidates. It's up to them in what order they choose to recognize candidates. Candidates will have up to 2 minutes to answer each question. Moderators will time the response. And then Caroline, you want to raise your hand? Caroline Krupe, who is our assistant director, will raise her hand when you have 15 seconds left, and then she'll indicate again when your time is up. You must stop speaking when Caroline signals that your time is up. Audience members, you can participate by going to menti.com and using this code. This code will be on every screen, so don't worry about missing it right now. Our moderators tonight are Reggie Tidwell, who is the founding chair of AIGA and owner of Curve Theory. He's also a member of the city's Public Art and Cultural Commission and one of our chairs of the Arts Coalition. And Jessica Tomasin, who's the founder of the Connect Beyond Festival, studio manager for Echo Mountain Recording Studio, and the chair of the city's Noise Ordinance Board. So, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
Great, thank you, Katie. Okay, thanks so much for being here today, candidates. We really appreciate your time. And so we're going to start with an icebreaker. You have 1 minute to introduce yourself, tell us more about your personal background and your experience in the arts. And we'll start with you, Allison Scott.
Thank y'all. Well, I'm Allison Scott, and I'm the Director of Impact and Innovation at the Campaign for Southern Equality here in Asheville. We work on LGBTQ advocacy issues. Before that, I was actually in the corporate world for a long time. I worked in IT management, database management, and other projects. And it was really great. I got to travel around a lot, and I appreciate that. As far as what I've done with the arts, I don't really have the artist gene. But something that I do have is I'm amazing with project management and supporting people. And one of the best things that I've done, one of the things I'm most proud of, is helping to support the queer artists here in Asheville through initiatives in my day job. And that was with a focus on BIPOC queer artists. Because we know that so many times in art, just like in other spaces, BIPOC people, is that it?
You have 15 more seconds.
Oh, I'm sorry. BIPOC people oftentimes don't have the funding or resources that's needed.
Thank you. Andrew?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Andrew Fletcher, and my history in my history in Asheville and my history as an artist are inextricably linked. I started taking piano lessons when I was 10, but it was not until I was part of the music community in Asheville that I called myself a musician, and that is when I started working as a professional piano player here, starting in 2010. I play with the Firecracker Jazz Band, and is actually on this very stage that I had one of my favorite parts of my musical history here, where I was the co-musical director for the ballet production based on the life of Zelda Fitzgerald right here on the stage. It was certainly a highlight of my time in Asheville. I also helped organize the Asheville Buskers Collective in 2014, and so my political work here has been inextricably linked to the work of an artist. I'm also a board member with the Asheville Music Professionals and represented the music industry during the noise ordinance discussion of the last year. It's my pleasure to be a working artist and a political candidate here in Asheville.
Thank you. Maggie?
Hey, everybody. We can hear okay. My name is Maggie Ullman Berthume, like perfume. And I've been in Asheville for 20 years. I came here to go to UNCA, where I studied environmental policy. And I'm a mom of an 8-year-old who at this point in my life does more art stuff than I do, but that's all right. You know, sometimes, like Allison, not always have to be artists to love, thrive, and need to be in a place where there's a lot of art. A little bit about my background. I've actually served you already as a public servant. I worked in Asheville City Hall for 7 years, where I was Asheville's first sustainability director. And during that time, I saved nearly $1 million a year on energy costs, and then was able to use that savings to fund new programming. So I know my way around the red tape, and I love it. So that says something, you know, if I want to go back knowing how it is, I think it's part of who I am. And I'm just grateful that we're having a conversation with political folks about the arts. I think it's very Asheville, and I love it. Thanks.
Thank you. Nina?
Good evening, everyone. This is the forum that I've been waiting for. I would like to say that art is literally in my blood. I am the daughter of 2 sculptors, Harold Tovish and Mariana Pineda. I grew up in a household of artists, surrounded by artists, and I was fortunate enough to find art was the key to the whole world for me. Before I was 12, I was lucky because of my parents. We lived for a year in Rome because my father was an artist in residence at the American Academy in Rome. We traveled around the world. I've been to more museums by the time I was 12 than most people will in their whole lifetime. I was very lucky in that respect. But I also learned an important thing growing up, which is that artists are workers, and art making is labor. They were the first people to form an artists union, the Boston Visual Artists Union. I grew up understanding that art is work.
Thank you. Kim?
Good evening. So glad to be here with you all today. My name is Kim Roney, and I'm running for mayor. My great-grandmother was born in Kenilworth in 1910. I come from a family of educators. I'm the oldest of 8 kids born and raised in the rural South. I'm a classically trained musician, a pianist and keyboard player. I've had an excellent opportunity to play with some renowned musicians. You may have seen the documentary Searching for Sugar Man that won the Oscar a few years ago. I'm one of the keyboard players who plays with Rodriguez. We played Radio City Music Hall and Austin City Limits and The Great Eagle. I'm a small business owner. As a music educator, I work with 34 students across 12 different schools in Asheville and Buncombe County. I helped to start 103.3 Asheville FM, the local community radio station in West Asheville, with some friends, where I was the executive director and oversaw daily operations.
You still have 15 seconds.
Oh, that's the 15-second wave. Then I'll go ahead and tell you that my partner of the past 17 years is a visual artist and spoken word artist. We are very much tied in with arts and music and culture in our community. I believe that the city that plays together will be able to stay together and grow together.
Thank you. Esther?
Thank you and good evening. First, let me apologize. I am going to be leaving early. I've got to go down the block and moderate Sherry Beasley's town hall. that's also happening tonight. It has been my pleasure to serve as Asheville's mayor since 2013, and I want to thank all of you for all the work you've done in our community around and in the arts. I know a lot of it unpaid and volunteer time. And I recognize Steph Munson-Dahl here with the city of Asheville, who a lot of you know, coordinating and working on the arts on behalf of the city. Like some of the folks that have spoken here already, art is a part of my growing up. My sister is a photographer, went to Cooper Union. My father is a writer and used to run the Center for Creative Retirement. My mother is a fiber artist, and I filled out this questionnaire with links to all their websites, so if anybody gets a hold of that, you can look at that. But I very much understand and have seen the struggle of the artist, and I value so much the contribution that art brings to the vibrancy of our community.
After realizing that funding the arts through the Strategic Partnership Grant program was not working, Buncombe County government created a separate arts and cultural block grant in 2022. This amounted to $129,788 for fiscal year 2023. This funding has been awarded to the Asheville Area Arts Council for regranting to arts nonprofits through their grant programs. This is a 50 cents per capita investment in arts and culture. Similarly, the city of Asheville has traditionally funded programs for arts nonprofits through the Strategic Partnership Grant Program. In 2019, arts organizations received 12% of $28,388 of the overall $234,501 awarded through the city's strategic partnership grants. But the new strategic partnership grant pilot program makes it virtually impossible for arts organizations to receive funding through this program, with no arts organizations receiving funding in the 2022 to 2023 funding cycle. Artists, arts organizations, and artistic activities in general play a valuable role in the development and long-term health and sustainability of our communities. Research shows that communities with a vibrant cultural scene are more desirable to live in, have greater economic stability, and attract a more diverse and educated workforce. Local government investment in the arts creates jobs, attracts investments, generate tax revenues, and stimulate local economies through tourism and consumer purchases. In the city where, if the city were to follow the county's lead and create an arts and culture block grant at 50 cents per capita, it would cost approximately $47,297, which is a small expense with a major return on investment. My question is, considering the significant impact the arts have on local economic development and community well-being, what role do you think local government should play in supporting arts and culture in the city of Asheville? Let's start with you, Andrew.
I just got 50 cents and change at the coffee house on my way here. I thought this is so perfect. This is 50 cents. This is about the sales tax revenue on a ham sandwich, a $7 ham sandwich. I'd like to point out that the arts are already contributing money into city coffers. The question is, are we going to choose to invest that money into the industry that is doing it? So every time you go out and you buy dinner on the way to see the symphony, or you have a meal or expenses, anything, the time you are enjoying the arts, you're generating sales. Some of that sales tax money is created because of the arts. So the arts is already helping to fund city government. The question is, are we going to accept that the arts are going to have an incredible place in our society, and that what we should expect as a prosperous place is a thriving and well-supported arts community? And are we going to take some of that sales tax revenue that comes from the economic impacts, and are we going to channel that back into the arts so that we can make sure that the arts community has a lasting place in this town? And that means absolutely we should be doing better than the county. The county was behind for many years, and we have room to make up, and so I think that we can do a little better than 50 cents per capita when it comes to investment in the arts.
Okay, Maggie, same question. And if you need me to restate it, let me know.
I think I'm good, thanks, Reggie. I have so much to say on this, but we always have to focus in the 2 minutes. Before the specific question, I think I want to be really clear that a city like Asheville isn't really Asheville without our art scene and without our artists and our art lovers, right? So you don't have to be a creator to be part of the creativity here. And so there's so many things when we look at policy, specifically local policy, that it might not be necessarily a direct job of the city in their charter to do X for this community or that, but you have to look at the whole picture. So when I think of roles that the city needs to play to support the arts community, the first thing I think about is housing, right? Squarely in the city's role is determining what can be built, where, and when. And right now, housing affordability is a crisis, and we know that at this point, artists are getting pushed out. The market is in control, and it's pushing Ashevilleans out of town. So city pursuing things like affordable housing much more aggressively than we have been creates space for people to stay in community where they want to be and to create. I love the idea of looking at a dedicated fund like the county has done. I mean, I was just talking to Ray, my best friend is an opera singer in Munich, and she's paid by the federal government. Like, she has a salary and benefits. And I know that's Germany, and Europe is a different case. But they're putting their money where their mouth is, where their values are. And so I think it's a really neat model for us to explore, which gets me to the second role is I want to learn a lot more about this from folks like you all and the leaders in the nonprofit community. What's not working with the strategic grant program right now? What do we want to see more of? And then, was that my 15 second? Okay, great. Well, we're getting there, Betty. We'll catch up. The last place I think is an important role is around advocacy, because there are state resources when it comes to arts communities. There are federal resources when it comes to arts communities. There are nonprofit resources. And so elected leadership can advocate for that community to bring other resources in to support our town as well.
Nina, same
Can I
question?
just ask for
I
a
will,
clarification?
Absolutely.
15 seconds and then stop.
I can do that.
That way we can tell which is which.
I will switch to that.
Thank you. So what I didn't tell you in my self-introduction is that I am an artist. I have an MFA in visual studies. I worked as a professional photographer for many years. I do mixed media work. I paint. I'm also a writer and a poet. I know the experience of being a professional artist from the inside. And I moved to Asheville for its cultural vibrancy and for the opportunities that I saw here for creative people of all sorts. Absolutely, any great city, any city worth living in, has a vibrant cultural scene. And this amount of money, $47,295, I don't even know if that's an area median income salary for one person in 1 year. This is an absolute drop in the bucket when it comes to supporting local arts. And actually, I think it's a shamefully small amount of money to be aiming for. I think we can do much, much better than this. As Andrew mentioned, our creative workers are a driving force for our local economy. And anyone who tells you otherwise doesn't understand what makes a city like Asheville work. I think Asheville has everything it needs. It has the beautiful local environment. It has the talented, creative people. It has entrepreneurs. It has small businesses. It has everything it needs to grow responsibly as a small city and be a shining example to the rest of the country about how we can take care of each other, move into the future together with creativity at our center.
Thank you, Kim.
try to cover 4 bases real quick. Number 1, we're artists and creatives and makers in this community, which means we are capable of getting the big picture and getting into the details. One of the details for me that wasn't popping up in the way this question was phrased was why the strategic partnership funds changed. We know there are disparities in our schools. Our schools are not serving Black and brown children. And so we chose as a council to prioritize equity in our outcomes of our school system, specifically with the strategic partnership fund. So I just wanted to get into that detail as we build this bigger picture. Number 2, one of the things we can do is address affordability. I think it's time for us to look at an affordability package for a future bond that addresses not just affordable housing, but affordable utilities, expands our transportation systems, and addresses the disproportionate impact of property taxes on historic Black and legacy neighborhoods, because we know that also impacts renters for commercial and residential property. Number 3, we gotta stop fighting over crumbs. That is a small amount. Let's go get our hotel occupancy tax dollars to make the city work for the people who live and work here. It will be a great place to visit. Also, I'm supported and endorsed by the WNC Central Labor Council. They brought up that the Teamsters not only deliver our packages through UPS, they also organize in the film industry. And they were asking me, why doesn't North Carolina have a robust film industry? And I reminded them that the notorious bigotry in House Bill 2 signaled to the entire country that North Carolina wasn't going to be a safe place for everyone to live and work. And so I support the leadership of people like Allison Scott, Campaign for Southern Equality, Equality and C. And as a member of the LGBTQ community, I know we have a long way to go in protecting human and civil rights, but that's one of the ways that we're going to be able to attract good paying jobs and make sure this is a great place to live and work for all the people who live here.
Is this a stop?
This is now 15 seconds. This is stop.
Well, this will probably be the last question I can stay for, so.
Thanks, Esther.
Hopefully I'll get it down. And I understand someone is maybe going to read my
Yes,
responses
correct.
that I submitted.
Yes.
And thanks for doing that.
But maybe dramatically.
I will sing them for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nobody wants that.
So this question is about the funding that would go directly to the Asheville Area Arts Council from the city. And as Councilwoman Roney has highlighted, there are a lot of very important competing interests on a city level. And the strategic partnership funds this year were dedicated solely to closing the opportunity gap for students in schools. And so just it wasn't that it excluded the arts in particular, it excluded anyone who could demonstrate that their program was specifically aimed at closing the opportunity gap for students in schools. But the arts are such a key component of what makes Asheville Asheville and its identity, so woven and integrated into what makes our city unique and not just anywhere USA, that the city has dedicated time, attention, and money to the arts. This building we're sitting in right now, this property is city-owned property. We invested in my time on council, $2 million towards the redevelopment of the art museum, and I'm not remembering the total figure for this project here at Diana Wortham, but there was an investment made here as well. I mean, if we want to go toe-to-toe with the county, I'll do it any day, because I know what our record looks like. And it's a pretty strong record around the arts. Right now, we're doing a visioning project in downtown that Steph Munsendal is working on over the replacement of the Vance Monument. Art gets right in the middle of that political discussion, and how are we going to reimagine our city center to better reflect our community, and doing that through art. That is something that the city is facilitating right now. We also have obviously integrated a lot of art into all of the projects that we're doing. If you go down into the River Arts District right now and see the city's Rad Tip project, which is our Greenway redevelopment project down there, you will see art. So there are many ways I think the city over the years has recognized the importance of art and put its money where its mouth is.
Thank you, Allison.
Yeah, this is one of the times when it's really great to be running with a lot of people who get it. We've said this at a lot of forums, like ditto, ditto, ditto. And a lot of things, I had written here to talk about going last, unfortunately, have been said. With the current funding this year, we know we have to identify and help students and close the achievement gap. That was a really big deal, and I was proud of our council for doing that. And we've got a lot of work to do. Asheville and arts, isn't that the same thing? So many people come here just because of our identity, our outdoors, our arts, this quirky, creative community that has been built long before any of us set foot here. And that's what we really need to focus on. We need to put a lot of attention on it. As Kim was saying, I worked a lot with fighting HB2. And recently, how that's come about is I have also been talking to the Women's Directors Guild in Hollywood, who is seeking to prioritize queer artists, queer filmmakers, and they want to come to the South, and they want to do it in a way that's respectful, but also recognize the history that has kept a lot of people shut out. And when we talk about arts and talk about the queer community, that is intrinsically tied to protest. It's tied to changing society and its rules. I was proud to help Black queer artists do projections on the Vance Monument to point out its racist history. Remember when I told you before, I don't have the artist gene? Well, I'm an art enthusiast, and that's how I show up. I've helped to find money to support Black and brown queer artists, and on the city council, I'm going to find money to keep funding the arts in Asheville.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to our next question, which is in regards to nonprofit support for outdoor events. So a little bit of background information for the candidates and for those in the audience is one significant role that the City of Asheville plays in supporting local jobs, emerging entrepreneurs, surrounding businesses, residents, and tourists is by hosting hundreds of outdoor events each year. A report commissioned by the city in 2017 estimated that these events support more than 1.5 million area visitors every year. Since 2010, the City of Asheville's strategic event partnership program has allowed for fee waivers and in some cases in-kind labor support. So that's police, sanitation, things like that for special events produced by select 501c nonprofit organizations. Changes to the program were proposed in 2018 and then tabled. In 2021, City Council approved a 75% fee discount for 501c nonprofit organizations for outdoor special events that are open to the public and produced on public property, which will remain in place until Council says otherwise. Now, in addition to raising outdoor event fees, the City Council intends to review the Strategic Event Partnership Program in late 2022. It is our understanding that there is a strong possibility this program could be cut and nonprofit discounts eliminated. My question is, considering how many businesses, jobs, residents, and tourists are supported by local festivals, concerts, parades, runs, block parties, and art markets held on city public space, what role do you think the city could play in supporting these events, especially those presented by local 501c3 nonprofits? And I believe Maggie, we'll start with you.
Thank you. So for the folks in the audience, the preamble that we're hearing, I just want to call out that not everybody does this in the forums, and it's really well researched and really thoughtful homework. I also appreciate when we get big picture questions without a lot of context, so I'm not, anyway, the point is, you're really setting the table for something specific. It's very thoughtful and I appreciate it. What I hear is death by 1,000 cuts, right? As I said before, I worked in City Hall when a woman named Diane Regier was here. We had a whole person, her full-time job was to run events and to support the arts community through events. I was there when the city decided to stop running Bell Share because they were looking for savings in the recession and it was $500,000 a year. Where'd that money go? Did that go into other art programming after that? It didn't, it got absorbed somewhere. And so we've been seeing, I hear death by 1,000 cuts, but I want to up us to the bigger picture of, I think that continues to happen unless you have leadership who maintains clear focus on what the big picture priority is. And I don't fault staff when they make certain cuts here and there, they're just doing the best they can. But leaders need to say, this is in the focus. And then that type of stuff pans out in different ways once it gets to specific decisions on specific programs. As it relates to this specific program, what I do want to say is, as the conversation is happening later this year, we need to make sure art folks are at the table. We need to make sure it's a coalition-based conversation. In my day job, I'm a climate advocate, and I build coalitions of nonprofits to get them to row in the same direction. It's not easy, but if you ensure that everyone's at the table when the conversation is happening, you have a much better chance of making sure that everyone understands why decisions get made and that they have their voices heard. So I hope that when I serve you on council, my 10 years of experience building solutions from coalitions can apply to things like this that we're working through in the arts community.
Thank you. Nina?
A vibrant public square is a symptom of a thriving community. If you live in a city that is big buildings, wide sidewalks, lots of stores, but there's no one in the public square, you know something's wrong. This is a symptom of an unhealthy community. Asheville thrives when its creative impulses are out in public. And that serves both the people who visit, but also it serves us, the people who live here, because we come to recognize and see one another. We build community through events like Buncombe, like Pride, like the numerous festivals. There was a recent one, I believe it was last weekend, a new festival that is just getting started that serves our local community as well as visitors. It's so important that the city be willing to invest in making sure that these events are safe and that they have the city services that they need. That would include sanitation support. I was very dismayed at Buncombe, for example, when I saw everyone was trying to do the right thing, but the trash receptacles were overflowing and they were surrounded by moats of garbage. People were trying to get them as close as they could to the trash receptacles, but there simply weren't enough of them to support the number of people visiting. We need public safety, we need crowd management for these things, and management of permitting and so forth for these events. But it is a key responsibility of city government to make sure that these events happen for our benefit as much as for any visitors.
Thank you. Kim?
I heard two things in the past week, and I've started to see where they might be talking about the same thing. One is an organizer of regular events in our community, and they had put on a festival, and they said, wow, just when we were ready to come back from the pandemic and be together in community in the public places and share food together and music and sell local goods, the partnership with the city got really hard, and it made it so that the event almost didn't happen. And they were telling me about the why. At the same time, I hear our youth say that the city has no love for them. There's no affordable housing, there's no jobs that pay, they see their parents struggling to make ends meet, and they don't have anywhere to be. So they wonder, is there a place for them? When I attend the events that we have in our public spaces, I see people of all different kinds of experiences and identity working together and celebrating together, and I hope that it's something that we care about, something that I care about. So how are we making it harder? I think with these new policies that we have in place, we need to look at the outcome of what happened from those decisions. One of the things that I've asked regularly on council is, when we have a vote that has to happen, every single one of those is going to have a staff report. It's going to have a financial impact and some pros and cons. I think we should have a equity impact and a sustainability impact or something like that added to every decision we make, because then we could look at what the cost is of doing something quick or cheap or business as usual, and then that's an extra cost that we're not looking at right now just because we're looking at the dollar amount up front. So I say that, saying if we do care, we're going to need to put time and energy, which means that we're going to have to support our staff being able to do that. I know that the staff in City Hall work really hard to make our events happen, but something's getting in the way. And so what I need to hear from the community is overwhelming support for us to do something meaningful and support our staff doing work to make our festivals happen.
Thank you, Kim. And I'm now going to read Esther's response to this question. The city works hard to support the many festivals and other events that wish to use city property to locate an event. I support our efforts. Recognizing the challenge of balancing the cost of the city and therefore taxpayers to host these events through staffing and other direct costs versus the burden on event producers, the city has carefully developed a fee schedule that reflects the actual cost of supporting events. However, recognizing the importance and significance of so many events hosted by nonprofits that might otherwise not be able to afford to host an event, the city deeply discounts the fees for nonprofits. There have been several instances where the city has worked directly with nonprofit event hosts to creatively solve cost barriers to ensure the event goes forward. I've supported those decisions. Allison?
Festivals and arts have deep roots in Asheville. And I think about this one a lot. You know, we were the same city that hosted the largest street festival in the South. And now so many groups come and talk about how difficult it is to even put on an event in the green space downtown, or to shut down one street for a few hours to host a concert or do something else. I personally helped a recent group with the Pride Festival. They got down to the last minute trying to scramble and get extra permission from the city to get coverage for security at the event, which is required to have your festival. And it's just one example of how all the groups are hitting these roadblocks, and they talk about the same things over and over. And the city staff's working hard. I mean, we've only got half a person doing this job right now. And I don't know about y'all, but half a person, that's not enough. We need to really look at what made Asheville successful. And it was festivals, it was events, and it put us on the map in a new way. And I think that's what we need in city council, is we need people who get the big picture and look at it from different lenses, whether it be equity, whether it be just the impact on the community, and sometimes just realizing that we need to help some groups more than others. I go back to looking at things through these different lenses, because some groups don't have any problem and they put on festivals year after year. But how do new groups put them on? How do groups led by BIPOC queer artists put on events if they've never done it before? They need people to help them. And right now that burden goes to city staff, which we're underfunding and underpaying.
Thank you. Andrew?
Well, if you're not going to give a discount to the nonprofits, who does it go to? In general, I don't think that we should be subsidizing for-profit corporations of any type. So, that, of course, that leaves out our subsidies for nonprofits. I absolutely believe that we should be helping these nonprofits. If you look at the City Council's strategic goals for 2036, if you look at the city's comprehensive plan, so many of these festivals and organizations and the goals that they accomplish and they seek to accomplish with these festivals completely line up with what the city is saying that they want to do already. So, of course, if somebody says, hey, we're going to come and help you with your vision for the city, shouldn't they absolutely get some help to do that? Doesn't it seem that all the intentions are aligned there? So I'm very much in favor of nonprofits that are putting on events that are compatible with the city. For instance, a nonprofit event that wants to restrict abortion access, I would be very much in support of that event. However, a nonprofit that wants to increase access to the arts, help close that opportunity gap for kids, or celebrate and promote equity, obviously there should be a sliding scale that the more of the goals that are in line with the City Council's goal and in line with their comprehensive plan, the steeper discount that they should get as an organization. We're not leveraging our public space to accomplish these goals with the partners that we have in the city. We have amazing nonprofits that do amazing work. If we're not going to help them achieve our goals, there's no one else that's going to step up to the plate on that stuff. As a city, we need to cherish the organizations and the people that we have here, and we need to do it with dollars.
Thanks, Andrew. Our next question relates to public art programming, program planning, maintenance, and staffing. Simply put, public art is art in public spaces. It is free and accessible to all. It can be permanent, temporary, visual, and/or performative. It is an economic driver, enhances cultural identity, promotes cultural understanding, supports creative industry business, and improves the well-being of all that encounter it. The city of Asheville has had a public art program since 1999. With the official forming of the Public Art Board in 2000, now the Public Art and Cultural Commission, and the passing of a Public Art Master Plan in 2001. Even though the Public Art and Cultural Commission has repeatedly identified the need for a new public master plan, the plan has not been updated since 2001 and is now over 20 years old. A lot of changes and improvements have happened to public art best practices in the last 20 years. In 2014, the city's percent of the arts policy went into effect and began with the 2016 fiscal year. It designates 1% of all qualifying capital improvement projects for public art, which generates $100,000 to $150,000 for the creation of new public art each year, but not for the maintenance of the city's public art collection. Currently, the city also designates $40,000 for the maintenance of public art each year, but there is a backlog of over $200,000 in deferred maintenance needs. Additionally, there has not been a designated staff position for arts and culture since Diane Ruggiero resigned, and her position was eliminated in 2011. For the last decade, staff has been expected to run the public art program in addition to their other duties. In 2022, a position was created in urban planning with half of the time designated for public art, but it is not enough. The program has definitely suffered from not having staff whose sole focus is dedicated to administering the public art program. In order to have an effective and efficient public art program, further investment from the city is needed for planning, maintenance, and staffing of the public art program. Question is, these assets provide many benefits to our community. How could the city improve their stewardship of Asheville's public art program? Let's start with you, Nina.
So the city budget has a very large line item for capital maintenance of facilities, of things that the city owns. People understand that buildings and buses and other equipment that's used to maintain the city need maintenance. Somehow, public art has fallen through the cracks. Public art is a cultural asset, but it's also a physical asset, and it needs and deserves the same kind of maintenance as any other capital investment of the city. Staffing for the creation, installation, and maintenance of public art should definitely be a line item in the city budget. I know all too well that public art doesn't care for itself, and different art installations have different maintenance needs. Public art that is not well maintained becomes at best an eyesore, and at worst, an actual hazard. And it makes the city look bad. An important thing to bear in mind as we go forward, for example, with envisioning public art in Pack Square, is that when you commission a work of art that is intended to be in public for an extended period of time, whether temporary or permanent, the budget for maintenance of that art needs to be included as you are evaluating the project. There needs to be a clear statement from the artist about the expectation of what it will take to maintain that work, and the city has to understand when it is acquiring it that that needs to be maintained and supported.
Thank you. Kim?
So I'm going to take a moment to talk about the how. And no one person can do all the things that the city needs to do by themselves. I'm committed to an open meetings policy. That means shared success and shared responsibility. It means removing barriers to participation so we can do this important work together to address the needs of our city. What does that look like for art? Right now, the Public Art Commission and the African American Heritage Commission are a group of volunteers who meet regularly and advise City Council on what needs to happen within their roles as advisory boards. We have programs like Art at the Heart. We might have an artist in residence one day. We have Black, Brown, and Indigenous leaders giving solutions for placemaking. And we have coalitions like this one that work to help us understand the needs of the artist community. So, I think what I could do as mayor is what I've already been doing for you as a council member, is asking that instead of us going to the table asking for just a little bit more of our hotel occupancy tax dollars, I made an amendment to our legislative agenda last year that asked for at least half. Because we're so far behind on infrastructure, and we're all picking up the tab for the tourism industry. It's out of control, and we've taken it too far. So, last year, $27 million of hotel occupancy taxes. This year, we have a projected $41 million. I would like to see that go towards infrastructure, towards a lot more than these amounts that we're fighting over. And I think it's possible if we come together and build an even bigger coalition. Once again, as mayor, I'm committed to scheduling those conversations in public, but the mayor also chairs the governance committee, and that's where the legislative agenda is scheduled. So you can count on me to continue that work as mayor.
Thank you. And I'm going to read Esther's response to that question. I have continuously supported the city's support and investment in the arts, especially through the city's public art program, with a goal of strengthening Asheville's identity as a work of art and supporting the vibrancy of the creative sector that calls Asheville home. The city recognizes that every resident's quality of life is improved when the arts are part of their public experience. And the city further recognizes the importance of supporting the artists themselves while growing the participation of communities traditionally underrepresented in public art and on public art boards. Allison?
Well, this is one of those times where not having an art gene really pays off because I get to geek out on numbers. So I went back and looked at some of the grants that we've given out for art in the past. And a lot of the maintenance in the recent grants was built in and required for the artists to put in for their project what the maintenance needs will be. And that's a great step because it does help us make informed decisions when we're looking at art installations and acquiring and putting out grants. But what would it look like if we could offset some of those costs? Take that off of the artists, still include it in the proposal, but what if the city could find that funding? And this is a great place for us to get our money back from tourism. I was very appreciative of the city council and people in Raleigh, such as Julie Mayfield, who helped to get us to a 66-33 split with the TDA. And I want more. We need more. And this isn't an Asheville problem. Every city in North Carolina with a TDA and a strong tourism economy, they are struggling with infrastructure and just making people pay their way. When you come here, you're driving on the same roads, you're using the same water as the rest of us, and you're getting to look at the art, and you're getting to enjoy what makes Asheville, Asheville. So I want to build a coalition of cities, just like we did for the non-discrimination ordinance, and go to Raleigh and say, this isn't Asheville. It's you against the state at that point. And I think it really makes a difference. And we need leaders who look at this picture out of the lens of just Asheville and thinking about how can we apply it to other areas like art. Think of some of that money and what it could do for keeping up the maintenance of the existing art in Asheville and in the future.
Thank you, Andrew.
Well, one of the things I'd like, is if I am elected, I would like to be the council liaison to the Public Art and Cultural Commission. It makes a big difference when you're on a board commission how present your council liaison is. And our council liaison, I believe, has been to one meeting in the 5 years I've served on the Public Art and Cultural Commission. I'm now the vice chair. That same council candidate is not here tonight. So that's a really simple thing. You can start by showing up, and that's what I'd love to do, and help shepherd the intentions of that board to full council and help be a great agent for the work of the Public Art and Cultural Commission, and to elevate that as a priority for the city, because we know we have this huge backlog of art. And you know, when I walk around downtown, sometimes I hear people say, like, isn't this supposed to be an arts town? And they just don't see what they've been sold in the same way. And I think that we have tremendous room to grow as a public art program here in Asheville. The urban trail right now needs a really big redo because there's a lot of really out-of-date pieces of it. We could be telling the story of Asheville in a much more equitable way through our art, and that is also going to take up some of that money to help tell the story through retell the story through our existing art. So those are some things that I would personally like to do. We can also support. I've started out as an advocate for buskers, and one of the things I've been asking the city to do for a long time now, and haven't found any headway on it as an organizer, is could we get the city to create a program that allows buskers to sell their own art during their performances? Now, this seems like a no-brainer. Really, it just should be a simple fee in a simple form, and the city should allow this to happen. We haven't been able to get that done either. So that would be a great way that you can connect people, working artists, to tours of dollars right here on the street without having to go through Raleigh and get it from the nasty old TVA.
Thank you, Maggie.
So I want to bring us back and ground us into the why of this question about public art. I'm making a big assumption here that y'all love art, that y'all probably make art. But pause for a second, think of a time that you've walked on a street anywhere and stopped in your tracks and just went like, wow, or look at that. Having art that's available and accessible to all of us in the public space, I think is really important. It can't just be in galleries, although galleries are great, but it needs to be available for all of us to feel that magic. It's very special when it is done that way. It should be available for all of us. When it comes to public money, what we pay taxes to, we've made some agreements on things that we should all have, right? We agree that we should have after-school programs. I think that's a great idea. Let's chip in through my tax bill. We agree that we should have roads and clean water and garbage service. These are all core city services of what we think it means to all pitch in for our society. And at one point, we saw public art that way. I mean, looking at the question, in 2000, in the past, we really did value art in our community as a core city service. And we did that slightly from a lens of improving economic development. And then as the economy boomed, we lost our value for it. We forgot about it. And the resources to support this thing that could be a core of who we are fell away. And as all of that happened, the people who produce all of that art, the expenses have gotten higher. It's been harder to live here. So where I'm going with all this is what happened to valuing art as a core city service? It's part of our culture, it's part of our fabric, and I think it needs to be part of our funding and our strategy for who we are to maintain who we are. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so our next question is one that I know very intimately, whether I want to or not, is noise ordinance issues. So a little background for the candidates and audience is that the current noise ordinance policy was developed after years of data collection, stakeholder input, which included music industry, community, neighborhood associations, all sorts of other folks, and basically aims to identify and prioritize noise concerns and develop clear and enforceable thresholds for noise generation. On September 27th, Interim Assistant City Manager Ben Woody gave an update on the city's noise ordinance 1 year after updates were put into effect on September 15th, 2021. Though noise from music venues was identified as an issue, although it was 8th on the list of survey of what was an issue, it was also stated that music venues have worked with the city staff to be compliant with these new standards, but that further mitigation measures might be needed. However, the current reporting systems used on the noise ordinance dashboard to track complaints does not track noise complaints from music venues or allow for cross-referencing to better understand the area of town, time of day of the week, or month certain types of complaints are most likely to fall under. It makes it difficult to clearly understand the real source of the issues. Is this a widespread issue? Is it 1 or 2 repeat offenders? Are we catering to a potentially small yet loud demographic of complainers? The music industry has proven itself to be a big economic driver for our community, creating jobs, attracting investments, generating tax revenues, and stimulating the local economy through tourism and consumer purchases. The Asheville Music Industry Cluster Analysis and Economic Impact infographic created by the Asheville Area Chamber of Commerce in 2016 shows employment growth in the music industry outperformed expectations and grew 4 times faster than expected from 2010 to 2016. In 2020, Asheville was ranked number 5 on the list of America's top 100 small cities and was described as an arts and music city. More restrictive noise ordinance policies would most certainly stifle this growth, along with the benefits that the music industry brings to the community. My question is, what could the city do to ensure its noise ordinance policies are not jeopardizing Asheville's thriving and growing music industry, given the clear benefits that this industry brings to our community? We'll start with you, Kim.
Well, first of all, I want to start with thank you. I think in this situation, it's not what the city can do, but it's what we can do. And I've seen you show up. I've seen AMP show up. I've seen the Asheville Area Arts Council show up around this. I haven't seen the city show up around an issue like we did for the noise ordinance, but I saw staff show up too. I saw staff take 2 years to really dig in and make sure, hey, we're having a really big noise complaint issue in multifamily housing and apartments where people live in close proximity. Why? When folks didn't, from those neighborhoods, respond to the survey, they went direct. That's the kind of public engagement I want to see happen more. I think it was a good example of public engagement. And then y'all brought the data. AMP and Asheville Area Arts Council said this is the economic engine. We're picking up the tab on the infrastructure for the city. We're coming right out of the pandemic. Please don't crush us. We just were able to bring music and performances of all kinds, spoken word, comedy, wrestling, and all those people showed up to our very first back-in-person council meeting, and we could have had a whole festival of professional performers, plus a Rolling Stone magazine writer, in the room explaining to us the impact of what it would mean to reduce the decibel for noise to a place where it is today. We made jazz brunch illegal. You can't play the trombone at all at the decibel that we set it to without a permit. Like there's potential impact. It shouldn't matter the genre of music you're playing or your lived experience, but will it? So I think this is where it's up to us as a city to participate in the Noise Advisory Board, to participate in public pressure, to deciding who serves on city council, to make sure that we have equitable outcomes from policies, not just like this, but we need to show up around all the important issues of our identity, of our culture, and the people that make Asheville special.
Thanks, Kim. I'll read Esther's response to this question. I supported the revised noise ordinance that strives to better balance the needs of those who not only make a living in the music industry and other industries where sound and noise is a factor, but also local people and visitors alike who enjoy the experience of our local music industry. Because the city was receiving nearly 2,000 noise complaints a year, it was apparent that the old noise ordinance was not functioning well. The city undertook a multi-year process to overhaul the noise ordinance and did so by engaging with the surveying the community and very specifically representatives of the music industry. The result is a compromise which the council just received the first update about at a recent meeting. The results are positive but continue to be a work in progress that the city will monitor and adjust if it is determined that the practical application of the noise ordinance is not serving the overall needs of the community, including those in the music industry. Allison?
Well, this is a great one because I told you a while ago, I love data. It's a huge part of my background. I really enjoy looking at it and analyzing it and trying to figure out what the patterns are. And I also know we have to be really careful because sometimes when you look at it, you're looking at it through your own biases. Sometimes when you look at it, it can lead you to inequitable outcomes. So it's a tool. It's not the only one we need to use when we look at these. And so when I hear people talk about the noise ordinance and the potential of it getting more restrictive or how we look at it, it's one of those times that, in my experience, I know we need to slow it down and let's think about it. Let's bring in community. Let's engage all the venues and say, what are you seeing? What are your neighbors seeing? Because looking at some of this data right now, the things that were listed in this question, it would be really nice to have some of that data, and it's there. It's just not visible on the dashboard. And bringing in community engagement and talking to them. I live near a music venue, and I hear people complain, some of my neighbors, and they just moved there. And I'm like, okay, well, you didn't drive around the neighborhood before you bought a house, and that's probably why you don't know that there's a music venue nearby. But it's little things like that. When people start complaining that the data won't tell you, but that community engagement will. And I think that goes back to just having leaders who can say, okay, let's look at this with a bigger lens, use our experience, and realize that what people are complaining about sometimes isn't really what they're complaining about. And through a little education, a little community involvement, we can come out of this with a great solution. And that's what I'm hoping the noise ordinance is. It's not perfect, but it's a start, and I think we can work on it. And I think we can make it more livable for all the residents in Asheville and support our artists and music venues and help them thrive.
Thank you. Andrew?
Oh boy, noise ordinance again. I spent a lot of last summer working on this. And I was the representative for the Asheville Music Professionals and weighed in at that meeting on July 27th of last year about the noise ordinance. And I think there's an important thing that we should understand where we came from. The old standard was a subjective one, and it was completely really handled by law enforcement, which means that you'd have somebody, I don't know how much time they spend on decibels and sound and basic law enforcement training. Probably not a lot, but that was the tool that we had at the city level to deal with noise previously, and it was subjective, which is, a subjective measure of volume from one person's ear to another is very different. So it was clear that we did need a new noise ordinance, and everyone I talked to in the music industry recognized that a new noise ordinance was going to come, and that we wanted to make sure that we were included in it. And I think this is a stunning example of success from the city in their public engagement that they did. It is a model, I think, for other cities dealing with the noise ordinance as far as who they talk to, the depth of conversation they talk to, everything Kim said about what the level of work that city staff did. I was incredibly impressed with it. Now, I think not only is it a model for other cities dealing with the noise ordinance, but it's a model for us when we're looking at other programs to enact in the future, and we're talking about other things that are going to be controversial, is that we can engage our way out of disagreement. And that is really what we did with the noise ordinance. And so far, we have not seen, our music industry remains. We haven't seen venues get shut down, but I do notice that the noise ordinance is not really addressing some of those higher frequency complaints. As For instance, purposely modified mufflers that are very loud that we see, and a lot of industrial and commercial noise. The music industry has been a very good partner in mitigating sound. I've talked to a lot of these folks, and I congratulate them on their effort.
Thank you. Maggie?
I keep writing notes, it's helpful. So, I agree with a lot of what my colleagues are saying. I think that when the community comes together to wrestle a topic that's really challenging and there's lots of different perspectives like the noise ordinance has been, it's really important to give it a fair shot. I think a year can be seen as a very short amount of time, but in public policy it is a very short amount of time. I think some people might want to say, oh, it's been too long, let's double down, but I think that it kind of dishonors everybody who came to the table already to negotiate what was resolved to open it up again right now. I think that we need to get much better information on performance, which has been said here already. Yeah, I mean, this is so hard. You go last, and everyone has very similar ideas. Oh, that's right, you are last, Nina, but that
Also
makes
a ballot.
Yes, by the way. But yeah, I guess, part of what I'd say is when you're hearing us say a lot of similar ideas, that's a good sign for Asheville, right? When I came here 20 years ago, you would hear very disparate concepts of what our future is. We are lucky that there is a lot of agreement on where we need to go. Your hard job is figuring out who's going to be effective at it. So good luck to y'all, and I'll pass to Nina.
As the person speaking last year, I do need to echo that I've heard a lot of very good commentary so far, and little to disagree with, if anything. I do think that pointing to the dashboard and its paucity of detail is important, because if there is a desire to modify this ordinance, it needs to be available to the public to see where the details take us. Without that kind of transparency, it's very difficult to make really good policy decisions, and for people in the public to understand what the data tells us. This is true not just for the noise ordinance, but in fact for a plethora of decisions that are constantly coming before City Council, where the public does not have access to the kind of information that will inform their response to proposals from council or from city staff. My understanding from what I've been hearing is that the new noise ordinance is actually working quite well. And I believe Ben Woody's report substantiates that. And that proportionately, far fewer complaints are coming from downtown or around music venues. Most of them are out in neighborhoods. The bulk of complaints are neighbors complaining about the dog barking. I have been one of those occasionally, I will confess. So it's important for us to really get granular about where these complaints are coming from and work to address those concerns in order of priority. The other issue is that, as Andrew mentioned previously, police were responding to all noise complaints. Now that's not the case, but that's only during working hours. And so the problem is that noise complaints in the evening are still being answered by the police. Let's get a staff person who's on call who can do that instead of the police.
Thank you, Nina. Katie, I'm going to throw it back to you. Do you want us to ask another question, or do you want to try and get some?
I'm going to ask some audience questions now. So I apologize on the last slide, the code was wrong. It was not updated, that's why it was highlighted. But this is the correct code. I've already got 15 questions, so we're gonna go probably 2 of them. But I will be sharing the questions with you afterwards, so you can see what the audience asked. So we're gonna go from one controversial topic to another. The first question that we've received is about the Duke Energy Substation and its potential impacts on Thomas Wolfe Auditorium. And so I will start with you, Allison, if you want to address your thoughts on the proposal for the substation.
The only thing better than going last is going first, so we should read Esther's comments. All right. The substation on the back of Thomas Wolfe. I didn't get to say this in the introduction, that I'm a fifth generation local who's never left. And I like to tell everybody, I think it may be more than 5 generations, but that's when my family learned how to read and write, so there's a record then. Not sure about it. The Thomas Wolfe Auditorium is woefully outdated. It needs a lot of work. It is a really key piece of downtown. When I go to Greenville and other cities that have really amazing event spaces downtown, I am so envious. I want us to expand. And I think there's some legitimate complaints about what this expansion looks like. Not only from reducing tree canopy of trees that have been there for years, but just how it came about. Duke has been a difficult partner in our community and in other communities all over North Carolina and South Carolina. And I think this is one time where they could give a little. I think they could find a place to put a substation in that would still allow us to expand on the Thomas Wolfe Auditorium. Because I do want to see us have an amazing event space down there. And I don't want it to move across the street just because that's the easy answer. But I also don't want it to stay where it's at. Because if any of you go to the Thomas Wolfe Auditorium, I am ashamed. I am really ashamed of that building. My high school graduation was in that building, and it is exactly the same as the day we were in that building, and that was, I'm not going to say when, but it was a while back. So this came up at one of the neighborhood forums, and people have all kinds of feelings on it, whether it's trees or equity issues or just how decisions are made. And I think it's a really, really great place to look at how we're making decisions and sometimes pump the brake and deny the big business and go with what the community needs.
Thomas Wolfe in the Civic Center is just about the only stage I haven't played in this town, maybe someday. But I have been backstage. If you haven't been backstage, the load-in is like this. It's like a 45-degree angle. It is, I have heard that there are well-weathered roadies who look at this load-in with jaw agape. It is so out of date and so difficult, and it actually prevents some really great acts from using the Thomas Wolfe Auditorium. So, yes, is there a need to fix the load-in in the backstage area of Thomas Wolfe? Yes. Do we have to give Duke Power everything they want to accomplish this? No. I want to say these things are really important. The land swap that has been proposed, Duke, what they propose to do with that piece of property, it looks like they want to build a prison there. Though it looks like a fortress of solitude they want to put above Lexington Avenue. Is highly unattractive. And I'm in no way of exchanging the green space that is in between that block with this building that looks maximum security. So I'm hoping that some creative solutions come up that would allow us to accomplish our goals to fix Thomas Wolfe, but also keep Lexington Avenue the beautiful place that I love so much. I mean, it's a very special part of downtown. One of my favorite areas to play in downtown, to hang out. It's still very local space. And I've organized Lexington Avenue before to actually fight a hotel project down there that would have gentrified that neighborhood. And I know that when those folks get together, they have a voice, and I'm hearing it.
So I'm going to repeat some things because I think that they're worth hearing, because there's several things that we've talked about tonight, like the noise ordinance, that are still happening, but also kind of in retrospect to how there's been a lot of energy. I think this conversation around the substation is going to be a big conversation our community has. It already is. There's a lot of people that are participating. So a couple of the ways that I think about it is, one, because there's clearly a lot of people with different opinions, we need to have a really good community conversation about it. So they can't be rushed forward. And I think the way it had been teed up thus far was too fast to honor that we have a lot of opinions on this. So we need to have a slower process that really lets us bring the voices together and suss it out. Personally, I feel I don't know what the word is, maybe a little frustrated that sometimes our memory is really short in this town. And so we hear some folks who are really upset about this substation. And then we're going, well, remember we've been talking about Thomas Wolfe for a long time. We haven't gotten the money yet, but it's a real priority. And it's just kind of forgotten from their priority set. So we can't forget that we've committed to making that a better space. So the trade-off to address this issue isn't just to trade off the space that we've been hoping to get for Thomas Wolfe. And I'll reiterate kind of this thoughts on Duke Energy. I was your first sustainability director. I have worked very closely directly with Duke Energy. I've taken them on at the state level with a state coalition of 15 cities. They're the second or third largest investor-owned utility in the country. They might not be rocket scientists, but they're nuclear scientists, for crying out loud. They can come up with some engineered solutions to meet what we're looking for. So we need to aggressively push back and say, we want it all. We want Thomas Wolfe. We want to keep our trees. We want Lexington beautiful. Y'all figure it out. They're one of the only partners we'll ever touch that actually has enough money to come back with maybe a solution. So I think leadership needs to push as hard and as long as possible until we put it on their plate to solve something for our city.
No disagreement with most of what's been said already. However, this is the classic example of competing interests for our city. And although in the public mind, I think it's been cast as trees versus evil energy corporation, which is kind of an understandable way to parse it, it's a little more complicated than that. It's a lot more complicated than that. The reality is that our growing city needs a reliable electrical infrastructure. And what we have now, the current substation, is 50 plus years old and past its reliable life. We need a new substation. I take that as a given. The question is, how are we going to do it in a way that satisfies the competing interests at stake here? For one thing, my understanding is that Duke is planning to replace the current substation with one very much like it, not with a modern gas-enclosed station, which is much more reliable, much safer, much more dependable, and much longer lasting. It will have a longer lifespan. Why is that? Well, they say they don't have the people who know how to operate them. This seems like the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life, especially after what we just heard from Maggie. These stations exist all over the world. The expertise is there to run these things. They're also smaller and more vertical, so it could have a smaller footprint, not be this sprawling horizontal thing that's being proposed for the parking space and the hill with the trees on it. Allison called attention to the process issues here. I completely agree that the fact that a lot of this was discussed early behind closed doors is a big issue. These discussions need to happen in public earlier so that we can chime in earlier.
Okay, Duke Energy Substation. I think the first step is, which comes first, the planning or the engagement? It has been the planning, and then we'll sell the public on it. And I'm just gonna be really consistent, because this meeting wasn't had in the public, it was had in check-ins. And I want to be really consistent and honor our staff who are also our neighbors. I said, why would you leave the tea kettle on blast, on the eye, when you could listen to the public, and they're probably gonna come up with a lot of the same ideas that you're gonna come up with, and then there's buy-in and there's education opportunities, instead of trying to come up with a plan behind the scenes and then hope they don't hate it. So it's really just like that chicken and the egg every time, isn't it? Plan, engagement, plan, engagement. I'm a big advocate of resource mapping. We have a lot of resources in our community that need to be addressed. The Thomas Wolfe, the tourist stadium, if we're gonna have a private-public partnership, what does it look like for the public to use it? These are the kinds of conversations we can have when we have transparency and accountability. We need to know why we need this new facility is because we're building really, really fast and we don't have the infrastructure to support it. That's why you see me out here Bernie Sandersing it going, can I once again get some solar panels on top of this apartment building? And I hear, well, that apartment building can't have solar panels on top because we put all the air conditioning units on top. That doesn't mean that those neighbors don't need solar. We keep making demand without the infrastructure. It's unwise, and it's not the kind of smart growth that our community demands, and it doesn't work for a hopeful future. So I'm looking for public engagement to come before the plan so we can have a say and get our resourceful neighbors to the table to bring our lived and professional experience. I want us to do some real honest resource mapping about what we have and how we're going to take care of it. We're going to need the tourism occupancy taxes to get it done, and I need you to keep bringing your voices to the table so we can come up with solutions together. Because no group of 7 people is going to be able to fix the mess that we're in without y'all coming to the table and helping.
Wonderful, thank you. So we have multiple questions about affordable housing. So I'm going to go ahead and ask the Arts Council's question since I have background information about affordable housing. By the end of 2021, creative industries in Buncombe County were still down by over 2,200 jobs from 2019 pre-pandemic totals. The majority of these job losses are in the arts and entertainment industries under leisure and hospitality, with historic sites in independent artists, writers, and performers making up 56% of the losses. While there are positions available, finding talent is proving challenging due to the local cost of living, limited availability of affordable housing, and other complex factors. These challenges were highlighted in the Buncombe County Creative Sector Earnings Report published by the Asheville Area Arts Council in November 2021. Findings shows that there is a growing gap between local cost of living and creative wages. On average, earnings for creative occupations in Buncombe County are 14% lower than state averages and 22% lower than national averages. Meanwhile, the cost of living index is consistently among the highest or is the highest in the state, which is largely driven by the cost of housing. The pandemic further aggravated the affordable housing problem in Buncombe County. In order to address the hiring shortage, creative solutions to affordable housing for local workers must be put in place. What do you think Buncombe County government should do to address affordable housing for local creative workers? Andrew, it's your turn to go first.
Do you mean Buncombe County or Asheville City?
Sorry, I meant that. Well, same thing.
Yeah, not quite, but I'm not quite. I won't be a county commissioner when I win, I'll put it that way.
Well, I would say most of the creative workers live in Buncombe County.
Well, yeah, they used to live in Asheville City.
Just to be fair.
Yeah, actually, so when we talk about housing and affordability, I'll say the number one thing I hear on the campaign trail, all the candidates have heard me do this bit before, is people who are my logical voters. I think they work in the city, they share a lot of the same issues as I do, and what they tell me, I wish I could vote for you, but I moved out to the county, I don't get to vote in city elections anymore. These are the people that we call traffic now. They used to be neighbors. So our wages and our price issues are blowing apart at speed right now. And I'm actually a senior in economics at UNC Asheville, so these economic data and stuff is stuff that I just love to consume. It's ways that I naturally think about it as a big picture way. But of course, it also reminds me of my life working as an artist here in Asheville and trying to stay in this town. One of the things that we can do is restore housing. The fastest way to do it is slow to build housing. But you know what we've done really quickly in this town is convert large numbers of our neighborhoods into short-term rentals. And so if you gave me $1 million and said, go find the most housing you can with this $1 million, you know what I'd do with it? I'd restrict short-term rentals, because that could be very fast. It would be hard to get any quicker effect with that money. But right now, you know, the city's kind of just been looking the other way on this. And I know that our toolkit is small, which is why we need creative people to use the tools that we do have, to try and restore as much of our existing housing back to neighbors and neighborhoods as possible. We also do need to continue to build housing, and I'm very much in support of the county's bond program to both build housing and conserve open space at the same time. I think that's a very smart approach to do that. I think that's sound land use planning. But the thing is that while I've been a critic of hotels run amok in this community, I've had no friends that have been displaced by hotels, and I've had a lot of friends displaced by short-term rentals and Airbnb. So that's where I get serious.
Thanks for this question. I'm kind of wouldn't feel like a forum if we weren't talking about housing. I'm saying that playfully, but sometimes you just have to get there because it's such a problem. I've personally myself knocked 913 doors, east, south, north, west, central. This is the number one thing. When I ask you, what do you want more of or less of from the city? Number one thing I hear is affordable housing. Everyone needs to be all hands on deck to be addressing this. And I'll be playful again, the question, what do you think Buncombe County should do? I will answer that question, because right now we have 2 bonds on the ballot that each of us will get to vote on as city citizens and or county citizens. One is $40 million for affordable housing, and the second is $30 million for open space for like farmland preservation and greenways. As a citizen, I'm voting yes on both of these. It will cost $37 per household across the county to pitch in as a team, as a community, to put these resources in. Why I think this is so timely and important for us to do as citizens is that when you invest public money towards affordable housing, you can leverage it substantially. So if we chip in $40 million, it is a conservative estimate that we could get twofold in return for affordable housing. This is a very big opportunity. The city passed a bond in 2016, $20 million for, I'm looking at stuff, you don't have to know everything, $20 million for affordable housing. The city has bought acres upon acres upon acres of land in the city at 2016 prices to then pave the way for affordable housing. It is a good use of public money. So I'm voting for that. When I serve you on city council, I will then make sure that all of the city money, the public money that the city has, is lining up with the same decision-making timelines as the county. I know that's not sexy, but if we can leverage existing city money with the county's bond, we can leverage further and further and further so that we race right now to address some of this quickly. Nina,
Yeah.
I very much hope that Buncombe County will designate a portion of the forthcoming bond, which I hope and expect will pass for affordable housing. I would like to see the county designate some of that money specifically for artists. When I first moved here, it was still possible to rent studio space in the River Arts District affordably, and housing was nowhere near as expensive as it is now. We see this time and time again in cities. Artists move into dilapidated, neglected portions of decaying industrial buildings and bring them back to life, make them a vibrant segment of the local economy, and then they get priced out of the very place that they have rejuvenated. What is wrong with this picture? This happened to my parents in Boston. I'm seeing it happening here in Asheville, and I think it is our responsibility as a community to mitigate the harm that is being done. Andrew mentioned housing, short-term housing rentals, vacation rentals. In the River Arts District, 2 buildings are completely gutted and are being turned into a hotel that used to be filled with productive working artists. The housing problem in Asheville needs to be addressed through a portfolio of solutions. Multifamily, zoning, infill, development, other creative approaches, maybe including a model called social housing, which takes the middleman profit out of building housing and allows a municipality to build and own the building and then sell it, but do it in a way that mixes income in one building so you get perpetual affordability that way. We have alternatives, we just need to follow through on them.
I'm glad Buncombe County's on here because Asheville's in Buncombe County, and so many times we forget that, and that's just going to be some sort of imaginary line. But there's a real line in how we pay our taxes, but we move back and forth across that line every day. So I wanted to mention that affordability is not just affordability of housing, but cost of living. For every dollar that's spent saving money, moving from the city limits to the county, it's looking close to 77 cents on the dollar that you then pay increased costs of transportation and parking and childcare. So when we're talking about affordability of housing, we need to realize that location affordability, having housing close to where you work or need to access groceries or other resources, is part of smart growth, and it's part of investment not just for now but for the future. I'd also like to point out that the county, like the city, needs to look at how we do land use incentive grants. Land use incentive grants work sort of like rent control in the sense that we provide tax incentives to include some affordability for a period of time. Right now, those are earmarked close to people making between $20 and $22 an hour. I think we're not getting what we need out of that, and if we're going to subsidize it with tax dollars, we need to get it closer to what we need, which is closer to 60% AMIs, which you'll hear, but it's like for folks making $15 to $18 an hour. Another thing that we can do, Buncombe County and the city could look at adding source of income discrimination protection. This means that we know that folks are being excluded from signing leases because of how they pay their rent. Veteran vouchers, housing vouchers, child support payments. And that kind of discrimination is preventing people from having access to housing. Charlotte just added this source of income protection to their city subsidized housing units. We could also lead, not lag on living wages. Because the city is lagging on living wages for our lowest paid staff, it's hard for us to set the standard in the region. But the mayor serves on the Economic Development Coalition. I would like to lead on living wages in the region.
I'm going to read Esther's response to this. I'm going to sing it to you. No. Okay, I am an advocate for affordable housing. As mayor, I have worked closely with Buncombe County to coordinate support for affordable housing in the city, such as the redevelopment of public housing, housing built by nonprofits such as Mountain Housing Opportunities, Homeward Bound's permanent supportive housing for those transitioning out of houselessness, and many private developers willing to incorporate affordable housing, including voucher-based housing, into their development projects. The county has adopted a goal of building or preserving between 2,800 and 3,150 housing units between now and 2030, with the majority of those being rentals for residents making 80% or less of the AMI, which is $42,100 for an individual. This bold goal can benefit residents working in the creative sector.
I'm going to take a little different track with this one because I don't want to say a lot of the same things that other people have said that I agree with. I think when we look at affordable housing, to answer that question, we need to look at it not just from creatives, but from a lot of different perspectives. We have to address redlining, the destruction of generational wealth in Black communities right here in Asheville, destroying them for city projects. So when we look at that and we say, who do you trust in the room to help make those decisions? This is why I want to be one of your 3 votes. You see, growing up here, I grew up in 5 generations of poverty. I've been homeless 3 times in my life. I've lived out of the car as a child. Sometimes my mom picking me up from school, getting in that car, getting back out the next morning. And I think it's important to have people in the room who have lived experience and real life experience, because that's what we're needing right now. We need change. We don't just need people shouting at the sky, yelling at the same problems we all know exist. I want to be one of the people in the room for you because I have a proven record of experience. I've gotten a lot done. It's really rare to run for a position and actually never have served as an elected person, but actually have policy in your background. I said earlier I helped to get the non-discrimination ordinance passed with a lot of other people here in Asheville, but also 20 other cities. I've also worked at the local, the state, and the federal level on a lot of different issues and getting bills introduced. And when we talk about affordable housing for the creative community, we need people that know how to get things done because this is a big problem. And a lot of these things, like yes to bonds, I am fully on board with bonds because it's going to fund it. And we need people in the room that have a track record of getting these kind of things done.
Thanks, guys. So now we're going to give you guys each a minute to do your final closing statements.
So Maggie, you got the short straw.
That's cool.
You get to start this.
I do this. Thanks for being here. None of these ideas happen unless you all are part of it, right? That's part of what's cool with democracy. I guess my parting thoughts would be, I encourage you to really look at who do you think can get something done. We have a lot of similar ideas, and we have very different experience sets. And I wear my former bureaucrat badge with pride, and it's not a theoretical set of experience, it's in like that building, the building that I want to serve you from. I've worked within that, with all of the departments, with many of the leaders, with many of you in the community. I did that as a public servant. And I know where the red tape is. I know where the state holds our hands behind our back. So I will always be starting right at the root of the problem based on all of that knowledge and experience, and I think it primes me to race very quickly once you elect me. Nina?
Thank you all for your attention this evening. If you're looking for an advocate on City Council for the arts, here I am. I'm an artist myself. I've worked as an artist. I've worked as a designer. I've worked as a communicator. I have cataloged art. I have curated shows. I have created interactive software about art for the Smithsonian. I've worked for the Folger Shakespeare Library. I'm a writer. I know how to tell a story, but I also know how to have a conversation. And I think what City Council needs is to be in conversation with the people who live here, to respond to our needs and concerns, to include us in the decisions that affect us early enough for it to make a difference, and that is transparent about how it does its work so that we can be held accountable for good solutions.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. My name is Kim Roney, and I'm running for mayor. I just wanted to acknowledge, as we hadn't heard it yet today, that we are on the land of the Eastern Band of Cherokee people. My great-great-grandparents were doctors here with the Cherokee people, and we just did pass a proclamation in support of the Eastern Band of Cherokee to restore the name of Kawohi to what's now known as Clingman's Dome. I've been in City Hall for 8 years advocating for you in advisory boards, and I'm in my second year on City Council. I believe that open meetings policy is the role of the mayor to schedule the behind-the-scenes meetings happening right now in the public. I'm also doing a Mayor Monday Minute outlining the role of the mayor to appoint the Housing Authority Board, oversee emergency declarations, serve on the Economic Development Coalition. So you can check out more at kimroneyforasheville.com, and I appreciate your consideration for the vote on November 8th.
Again, thank y'all for coming out here tonight. Well, along with my resume, I'm going to throw in something else. I want each of you to help me make history. You see, I would be the first out transgender person ever elected to an office in the state of North Carolina. Bringing a thorough resume with lived experiences and my work is the reason I'm up here. My dedication to the public and to communities started before I ever sat down here tonight, and it's not going to end. I've shown time and time again, I bring results, and I show up. And I want to do that for everyone, not just the community I've been serving, but for a lot of others, like arts. When we talk about these issues, I'm the person that I think you'd want in the room. Thank you.
I'm really glad I came here tonight. These are questions that matter to me as someone who wants a future in the city of Asheville, but I rent and I'm not really sure whether me and people like me get to stay here. My candidacy is a test of this question. It's a test of you. Do you think that the people who experience the problems of the city should also take that experience to a place of decision making? I came to the Arts Council event, but I didn't respond to the realtors questionnaire because I'm with the people who celebrate the city, not with the people who sell the city. I care about the people in this town that have 2 jobs. not the people here looking to have a second home. And if you want someone who will have a seamless thread from struggling as an artist in this city to helping make decisions that will affect struggling artists in this city, then I'm your guy. My name's Andrew Fletcher. I'm asking you guys to vote for me on November 8th. Thanks.
Thanks all. I hope everyone will join me in giving a big round of applause to our candidates. I really appreciate all the applause. Also a big round of applause to our moderators, Reggie, Tidwell, and Tomasin. So, mark your calendars. The Arts Council's next event is on November 2nd at the Orange Field. This is the State of the Arts address. We'll be presenting a lot of our data and reports at that event to find out about the current state of our arts sector. We'll also be presenting the John Cram Arts Leadership Award to John Ellis this year. And we have some very big announcements about the future of the Arts Council that we'll be sharing. So I hope you'll be able to join us. I've included on this slide some really important upcoming voter election dates. Voter registration deadline is October 14th. Absentee ballot request deadline is November 1st. Early voting begins October 20th through November 5th, and the election is November 8th. And that is all I have for you tonight. So thank you for joining us again.
Thanks, Katie.